There we go. Awesome. Okay, so we are here to talk about etiquette in Japan, do's and don'ts. Japan is not, it's not the United States, it's not the UK, uh, and they definitely do things differently. And sometimes we don't know why, and so I'm hoping to give some color to that. So there's a big list here. I will scroll down and go to the each individual section where it talks about it. And yeah, we'll jump into it. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat. I've got that up. I'll be able to answer them as I go. So some of these I will skip just because they're not as crucial. So let's talk about walking and eating. Okay. Out here, it's very common. You grab, something, you walk down the street while you eat it. Okay, what you're going to find, which is so fun in Japan, is that public trash cans are not readily available. I'm sure a lot of you have heard this. On my very first trip to Japan, I was walking around with a bag of trash, not knowing what to do with it because I had no idea. So they do not have trash cans everywhere. A lot of times you can find them at the convenience stores. So if you are looking to throw something away, 7-Elevens, Family Mart, Lawson, many times you can find a trash can there. You're going to be there during cherry blossom season if you're coming before if you're visiting, throughout April prior to Star Wars Celebration, there might be, yeah, exactly. There might be trash cans and bins out just because there are festival stuff and lots of trash gets generated. But generally, they're not available. So the two things that happen are this. One, if you bring something with you that generates trash, then you take it home, right? That's generally the rule. So if you're going to bring trash, I brought this package of food that I'm going to eat on this hike. You put the trash in your bag and you take it back to the hotel and you throw it away there. If you purchase something from a vendor, you don't generally walk around and eat it. Now, no one's going to give you a big stink eye or say anything if you walk and eat, but it is a general custom in Japan not to do that because that generates trash. So you eat, like you buy a little stick of karage chicken or some Kyoto beef or whatever it happens to be. You eat it and then you take the trash and you give it back to the vendor. They will absolutely accept the trash back. So definitely do that. Do not take your trash to a different vendor. They won't take your trash. They don't want your trash. They only have limited space for the trash that they're generating, right? So you give it back. So eat your food, hand it back if you're just doing a konbini run or you've got street food, anything like that. Eat it and then hand it back. Don't start walking down the street with it unless you have a bag with you to put it away in because there will not be a place for you to throw it out. So, smoking is kind of the same thing now. Public smoking, there's been a big crackdown on that. So you will see, if you are a smoker, smoking rooms and smoking designated areas. So just be on the lookout. There are smoking rooms in the trains, there are smoking rooms outside of train stations and things like that. My advice is do what the locals do. If you see a local smoking, you can probably smoke, or they just didn't care. But either way, hey, you're there, right? Smoking it didn't used to be that way about maybe just before COVID. They started cracking down a little bit on that. So, chopsticks. This will be quick. There are some things you just don't do with chopsticks, and the reason is because they are funeral rituals. So you don't stick your chopsticks straight down in the bowl and stand them up on end. That's a funeral ritual. You don't use your food to pass chopsticks between each other. You let someone take it from your plate, take it from their plate. Don't, do that. The don't rub your chopsticks together is actually wrong. I'd just like to point this out. This is something I used to believe as well. If it is something you're not supposed to do, the Japanese people don't seem to realize it because I have seen a ton of Japanese people clean splinters off their chopsticks one way or another, and rubbing them together is one way to do that. So now, granted, yes, they're saying it could imply that the chopsticks establishments aren't of good quality. Fine, maybe don't be so obvious about it, but I've seen many people do that. So I would say that this isn't really as strong a rule as people may have said. And then, don't stab things. If you're having trouble and you think, I know I'm going to have trouble with chopsticks, bring a travel fork with you. or ask for a fork while you're there. They will not be offended. They understand that not all foreigners can use chopsticks. So don't be afraid to bring your own kind of stuff. Miteki, yes, in Tokyo, there is a place, I can link that later after this. There is a place where you select your wood and you put it in a little mold, and then they give you a planer, and you're able to essentially plane your chopstick into shape, so it's got that tapered shape, and make your own chopstick. That is something you can do. The chopsticks rest is there, so you can put your chopsticks down on the table, have the ends that you've been using on the rest, right? Yeah. Okay. So just don't stick it in things. Don't pass food between chopsticks. That's generally just, it evokes the image of death, and so they don't like that. Woodworks Calgo. Yes. Thank you, Tron. That is the correct place. I even opened up for you guys because I'm streaming, so you can see it. This place is here. I think it's like 25. So you can see they have these little, so you'll take square dowels, essentially, put them in there, and then they will essentially stick up right where they need to, and then you can plane them with a Japanese planer there until they're the shape that you want. And so they have a whole bunch of different woods and things that you can pick from. You go through all the boxes, and each one has the price of the wood, and then you're able to do it. I'm actually might be doing this with somebody on my April trip just because they were interested. So it's a fun time. All right. Geisha and Maiko. Lately, there has been a really big problem with the... Did I say Geisha? Whoops. I think I was seeing Maiko when I said that. Geisha and Maiko. There has been a really big problem lately with tourists crowding. It gets a little bad. So some rules have started to where people aren't allowed to go to certain places in Gyeon, things like that. Gyeon itself is still open generally, but there are some private streets that you're not allowed to go down now. There will be signs for that. But basically, if you see them, don't mad dash and rush and make a huge scene. We get it. It's really cool. They're in a public place. It's okay to try to maybe take a photo if photos are allowed in that area. Gyeon says no phones allowed, no photography. People don't adhere to that, but it does say that. But if you're in somewhere else and you happen to see someone, it's okay to be like, oh, I see that. I'm going to maybe try to take a photo as they're walking by. Like, okay. But trying to get a selfie, crowding around them, things like that, obviously not in good taste. The other thing is, okay, they actually cover this. There are lots of people who actually pay to get dressed up like a geisha and be shuttled around. So you may see people that look like geisha who are not geisha, but the look is the same. So they're great for photos either way. Just FYI. There are services that do that, though. All right. If you're going to Nara Park or you're going to Miyajima Island in Hiroshima, just be aware of the deer. That's all. You can buy crackers to feed the deer, but they will eat anything, including your shirt. So just be aware of that. And they get really aggressive because they're used to people feeding them, and then they get annoyed if you don't feed them. And so they will headbutt you a little bit to say, hey, give me that food. So just be aware, as this article talks about, deer-related injuries have gone up. Yeah, it's really... Yuak, it's really only the one area in Gyeon, but the main drag in Gyeon is open. So I've been there since they did the closure, and nothing feels really restrictive, I guess, because the places people were going, they shouldn't have been going anyways. So, okay. Obviously, I don't have to say this, but don't deface UNESCO World Heritage Sites, right? Don't carve your name. If you go through Arashiyama, you'll see people have carved their names into the bamboo and stuff. It's like, okay, don't do that. I'm not going to cover this. Go wherever you guys want to go. If you guys want to go to Starbucks every day, that's your prerogative. Some of these things I'm not. Learning some basic Japanese. This could be really, really useful. And I'm happy to do a session where we are just maybe just release like a one page thing of some survival phrases. You can also just look those up, but I'm happy to do that if there is interest. And I could actually maybe tell you phrases to learn that would be better than some of the survival phrases that are out there. But learning just a tiny bit of Japanese is really, really great. You got to understand that Japan is a monoculture, right? They do not have a lot of foreigners, more now than there used to be, but they don't have a lot of foreigners, especially when you get outside the main city areas where they're used to seeing foreigners. There is no assumption that anybody would know Japanese because they don't know anything else, though some know English, but not very many. So the knowing just a little bit really shows you're trying, and they really light up and are happy that you do that. And they will tell you are so skilled. You will hear Jozu, Jozune. You'll hear that all the time when you, even if you say one phrase, because they just want to compliment you for even trying, right? So yeah, definitely learning a few phrases. Onegaishimasu might be what you're thinking of, Ewok. Onegaishimasu. That's more of like please, whereas kudasai is like please give to me. But yeah. All right. This is a fun one. And I just want to mention it. You can slurp in Japan. Like, I know that's like here at my dinner table, slurping's not allowed, right? But it used to be that you would know the best places to go based on the slurping you could hear. Now it's too loud and too crowded. Okay. So the yeah, slurping is great. It's actually a way to compliment the chef, just in case you're curious. Slurp them noodles. Okay. Tip: there is no tipping in Japan, with two exceptions. Tour guides can be tipped if you are going to pay for a... Sorry, I'm going to flip this over here. If you're going to pay for a guide and maybe a day guide, someone to take you out, anything like that, then you can tip the guide. Taxis can be tipped, but aren't required to be tipped. Just something there. Otherwise, for the most part, ryokans would be the last one. You can tip at ryokans if you're going to stay at like a nice place that has the tatami and they do the meal and they have the onsen and all of that. You can, but generally what you want to do is you want to put money in an envelope. They don't like handing money just straight. It just feels wrong to them. Put money in an envelope. You can leave it there on the table when you go. That way they know it's for them. Same thing with tipping a guide. If you're going to have a guide, bring money in an envelope so you can hand it to them. Try to always hand everything with two hands when you're handing things back and forth. In Japan, it's polite to do that. But tipping otherwise, no tipping at restaurants. Nothing like that. So, nothing that you need to worry about there, which is quite nice. So, the other thing with money that I want to highlight is there will be, I don't have one here. There will be a tray on all the counters. That is where you put your money. You don't hand your money. Like I said, they don't like handing money directly. So you put your, oh, thank you, Google Chrome. Really appreciate that. You put your money on the tray, and many times they will put your change in the tray. Very rarely will they hand money back and forth. Bowing. This one, what I would say is head nods and very slight bows. If you see that somebody bow towards you for saying thank you, for shopping with them or anything like that, a very slight bend at the waist and a nod of the head is good. You do not need to deep bow at the waist. In fact, you'll make them feel very awkward because that is just not, you don't go that deep except for certain kinds of situations, right? You just bend slightly at the hip, nod the head a little, and you're good. Okay. So just a note there for that. Like, that is too far. Let me just put it that way. Too far. You don't need to do anything dramatic. That is for a certain situation that they're in, but not you. Okay. Public transit. I mean, I'm not gonna cover this on here exactly because we've already covered some of it. But take the public transit unless you're gonna, rent a car. That could be really cool. But um, trains everywhere. But that's not etiquette stuff. So let's. All right, trains. It is considered rude to be disturbing in the peace, right? And trains are dead quiet, usually. Maybe there's people whispering in a corner, right? People don't talk to each other. Everyone's going to sit down. They're going to read their book. They're going to read their manga. They're going to play their games on their phone, and they're going to ignore the world. Most of them have headphones in. Most people are not going to converse with you. Don't be loud. You're tourists. You get a little bit of leeway, but don't be laughing up a storm from the bar and whatever you just came from. Every now and then you'll see like a Japanese guy doing that, and he's drunk, and everyone will sort of like shuffle away from him and make space because nobody wants to be around that. Nobody wants to be disturbed by that. So just be aware. Loud noises. Generally, there's no eating on the local trains. Your water and stuff is fine. Bullet trains, though, do have a tray. You're able to sit. Think of it like an airplane. You're able to sit and eat a bento, and that's fine. And there is trash on the trains, so that's fine. But being quiet is a big, big key. Everywhere in Japan, you will notice, and with that means telephone conversations. They do not really like you to be on the phone when you are in trains and things of that nature, because that tends to generate a lot of noise. So, okay. Two hands when giving and accepting things, just be aware of. It's not like you're going to offend them if you only use one hand, but the idea is not that they're going to hand you business cards, but even if they're handing you your what you just bought, they usually will hand it with two hands to you. Try to accept things with two hands. It's just polite and courteous. Okay. For this, you walk on the left. This is only true. This is not true in Osaka. Okay. But you walk on the left. You stand on the escalators on the left. That is generally how that goes. Here in the US, we drive on the right, so it's a little bit of an adjustment for people who are used to walking on the right. You'll find yourself walking in traffic. However, in Osaka, people walk on the opposite side. Osaka likes to be a little punk, likes to be a little different. They're always doing that. It switches. So if you're in Tokyo for a week, you get real used to it. Then you move to Osaka. Suddenly you find yourself in the middle of the crowd and you don't understand why. It's because it has switched. Okay. Generally follow the crowds. But I don't know if there's a later one that's going to talk about this. So I'm going to cover this here. No, there's Osaka. Oh, I guess they're talking. Do they talk? Yeah. One exception is Osaka. What do you know? Okay. But something to be aware of with the escalators. On the escalators, there's almost always, not all escalators, but most escalators have room for two people to stand side by side. Don't do that. Always stand in single file line. You will see the line back up. It goes very, very quickly. Don't panic that it's got a really long line. Just file into the line. Stay on the left if you're in Tokyo and everywhere else in Japan except for Osaka, and leave that right lane open. That means if you have a bag, put it in front of you. Okay? Leave that lane, because if somebody needs to rush for their train, while they say don't run, everyone leaves that lane open. So if somebody needs to move quickly, they can and they are able to. That is being courteous in Japan. Speaking of luggage on escalators, I'm just going to note this real quick. When you get on the escalator, put your luggage in front of you. I have seen too many times where somebody is rolling their bag, and as they get on the escalator starts to go up, the bag gets caught on something, and they get pulled backwards. You don't want to fall and get injured on the escalators, so bring your bag in front of you when you get on the escalator. That way you have control over it. Okay? Yes. Okay, kanpai, that's their version of cheers, if you're interested. If you're in an izakaya, you can get the whole place doing it. It's great. So, kanpai. Something that I'm going to say, and I'm glad they mentioned it here. This is a word that you guys are going to want to remember. Is nihonshu. Nihon meaning Japan, and the shu is for like alcohol. It's a different version of like sake. Nihonshu means Japanese style alcohol. That usually means sake, but it more specifically means the sake made in traditional methods there in Japan and so on. A lot of the sake we get out here isn't considered Nihonshu because they don't export as much of that. And they'll even have breweries out here, some of them, and that is not even maybe Nihonshu. So if you're ever in a place and you really want stuff that you can guarantee is close to the real deal as you want, and just ask, what do you have that's Nihonshu? Okay. It's a great one to know. All right. Vending machines. Yep, they are everywhere. Feel free. I think there's an app. I'll have to find it. A map that has all the cool ones. Because most of them are just drinks. Most vending machines you see are going to be these kinds. Not with necessarily the Pokemon on it, but coffees and things like that. Something to note with the vending machines, which you can kind of see here. Oh man, that really jumped. Okay, here we go. Is if you notice, and you kind of have to look closely, but you notice how this one has blue labels on the top and then red labels on the bottom. Red labels mean it's hot. Blue labels means it's cold. They have both in the same machine. So if you're looking for a hot coffee in the morning, you can actually get them right out the vending machines. Same thing as cold. So just be aware. Hot and cold are generally available. Most, like I said, 90% of all vending machines are going to be drink vending machines. You won't always see food ones or all the specialty ones. They do exist, but they're just not like the ones on all the street corners and the platforms of the trains are mostly drinks. But there are plenty of really cool ones. I feel like this is the case everywhere in the world. Don't blow your nose loudly. Okay. We'll skip. Okay, jaywalking. This is a big one. They will wait. Most Japanese, will wait at an intersection, even if it's completely empty in the middle of nowhere, until the light turns. Most places don't have a button. Maybe out in the rural areas they do. But most places, just like some of the bigger cities in like the U.S., no buttons needed. You just wait, and you go when you go. Don't jaywalk. Yeah. So just you'll be the only one doing it, and everyone will be staring at you. So just be aware that that's not a thing. Okay? They do hang on to your rubbish. Like I said, I covered that. Trash is not everywhere. Okay, yes, eat it. I'm sure everyone here is ready for a konbini. 7-Eleven, Family Mart, great place to get breakfast. If you're looking at hotels and you're looking to book your hotel with breakfast prepaid, I would double check that if I were you. And the reason why I say that is most of the time it's not any more or any less to book it like without and then buy breakfast while you're there at the hotel. Every hotel that I've ever been to, the breakfast is not exclusive to you didn't prepay your breakfast so you don't get it. You can pay to go eat, and it's usually the same price as what you booked with. So if you want the option of saving money or eating at the konbinis for breakfast, sometimes you can just not prepay breakfast for some of those. If it's done, it's done. It's not a big deal, but it is an option to just not prepay breakfast, and then you can choose to pay the 1,500 yen to eat breakfast there if you want. Most of the time, they hand you a breakfast coupon, and you go use that if you prepaid, right? So it's the same thing either way. So just be aware of that. Lots of goodies. If you find stuff at the convenience store, you can ask them to heat it up. There'll be bentos and things like that. So, okay. I don't know if anyone's afraid to use the toilets, but this has actually got a nice little guide here for you. So check out. I linked this. This is a great little guide that I think would be useful for people going to Japan. But there's nothing to be afraid of. However, there is definitely something I do want to talk about relating to bathrooms that they haven't covered. I'm going to pull this. Sorry for the noise of the wrapper here. What you're going to want to have with you is a cloth of some kind. Now, these I give to my customers, so they already have one when they go. But this is called a tenugui, but any cloth will do, a handkerchief, anything like that, you will want to have with you. The bathrooms in Japan, while there will be soap and water most of the time for public restrooms, there will not be paper towels. So you will find that there is no place to dry your hands. Now, there are air dryers in a lot of them now, but those, after they were installed, were then shut off, and you were told not to use them because of the spread of COVID. So they are starting to go back to using those, but you will still encounter situations where you wash your hands and you have nowhere to dry them, and you end up wiping them on your, whatever. Have a little handkerchief with you. It's really, really handy. Allows you to dry your hands after you do all that, and you're good. So just something to be aware of. There's also all kinds of things with Japanese toilets. Sometimes they spray perfume. Sometimes they play music. There's a really funny one in Kyoto at one of the temples, Kiyomizu-dera. The bathrooms there, they have a little rainfall effect that you can play. So it sounds like trickling water in a sense, or like kind of like gentle rain. And the idea is to hide the sound of peeing, but all the women go in, they all turn them on, so you walk into like a rainstorm, basically, is what it sounds like. Was my wife just described it to me, at least, and it's kind of hilarious. So just be aware they've got all kinds of options. You'll even find that many of them are in the cold. The seats are warmed so that you don't have a cold seat. It's quite nice. It's not uncommon for people to come home and then buy a bidet because of their experience in Japan. All right. Yeah, browse stores and go shopping. Okay, dressing conservatively. This is not a requirement. However, you can be off-putting if you show too much. Now, I'm a shorts and t-shirt guy, and I would stand out by wearing that, but there's nothing wrong with wearing that. You notice the men really just wear pants and long sleeve most of the time. The women, however, will show leg, but they tend to not show anything in the upper body. There tends to be not a lot of cleavage and shoulders and short sleeves and things like that. So does it mean you can't do that? But just understand that you're injecting yourself into a society that is generally more conservative. And by dressing not conservatively, you will draw attention, potentially. You might make some people uncomfortable, things like that. So just be aware. It's not... If it's drastic enough, you might be told not to enter a certain establishment, but, you got to be wearing, like a bikini walking around to get to that level, possibly. So I'm not saying you need to worry if you're like, hey, I have a bunch of crop tops and I want to wear them. That's probably fine. Just be aware that there is just a little more of a conservative culture. So shoes off pretty much anytime there is an elevation change. That is your indication that your shoes need to come off. It's usually very apparent because there will be slippers available and things like that. But generally, all of the houses and all of the different areas in Japan will always have a step up, so that way all dirt can be swept out, and you leave the dirt down there, you leave your shoes down there, and you step into the slippers. I don't fit in the slippers, okay? I do not fit in slippers there. Just cram my feet in and you go. It's what you got to do. But I wear a size like 12 to 13 depending on the shoe. So to be fair, they don't have feet like that in Japan, unless you're sumo. So yeah, you'll see little slippers a lot of the times like these, and that's generally what you'll use. Some shrines and temples, they may ask you to take your shoes off before you step up onto maybe the grander stage that's there. If you're going in ryokan, they will ask you to, take your shoes off, and then they'll provide slippers for you to walk around. And then in bathrooms, many times, not in the hotel room. In the hotel rooms, they don't have bathroom slippers, mainly because it's just a self-contained sort of wet room, and you don't need to worry about it. You're probably going to be in there barefoot most of the time anyways. But in ryokan, any place where it's not quite like that, they will have bathroom slippers. And so they'll have a pair of slippers in the bathroom. And the idea is the floors in the bathrooms get dirtier than the regular room. And so if you walk in there with your slippers, you're now going to dirty everything with bathroom floor, right? So you're going to transfer into those slippers. So please use those, even if it's inconvenient or uncomfortable because they're not the right size. Please use those. It helps them keep everything clean and you're adhering to the culture, if that makes sense. Again, phone usage, as I mentioned before, right? People like it quiet. If it's quiet, don't be on the phone in that area. On trains, don't be on the phone. Obviously, the museums and things like that, that's the same here, but just they like it very, very quiet. So this is an interesting one a lot of people don't realize and is actually really offensive to the Japanese. One, about perfume in general. The Japanese men and women generally are going for a non-scent existence. They wear very, very light, very sensitive perfumes and colognes in order to almost neutralize all scent around them so that you smell nothing. That is generally the goal, and they'll be just very, very light scents. When you get a ton of people crowded into a train and everyone was wearing strong perfume, it would be horrendous, right? It would not be very enjoyable. And so, one, if you have really strong perfumes, be aware of that. Maybe bring something lighter. Maybe use less of it. Just be aware of that. The other option, or the other thing to comment on, is what it's saying here. Absolutely, if you're going to go eat sushi, don't have anything strong. Sushi in Japan is a very sensory experience for the Japanese, right? They enjoy the sight, the smell, the flavors of Japanese sushi are very, very light, very, very subtle for anyone who's ever had sushi. And it's not a roll covered in sauce and all that. It's just nigiri, fish on rice. It is very light. And having a strong perfume essentially messes up everybody's ability to taste and therefore ruins the experience for everybody there. So, yes, John, they'd rather smell your sweat, I guess. I don't know what to tell you. No, they work hard at neutralizing as opposed to covering. So, so just be aware of that. Be sensitive to the culture and to kind of the things that are there. Something to note about reservations. A lot of things in Japan, not a lot of restaurants take reservations, but they can and they do. But most regular places don't, just like out here. You just walk into a ramen shop or a taco place. You're not going to need a reservation. However, certain things like maid cafes or the ninja robot restaurant, some of these kinds of things, though I thought the robot restaurant was closed. Oh, it has now reopened. There we go. They do require reservations, and as many of you have found out, it can be quite a chore to get them. So just be aware of that. Availability can be quite difficult for some of these things. Okay. Let's see. Obviously, book accommodation in advance and you go anywhere. I have not looked at the rest of these. Yes, have a prepared itinerary. Okay, cool. I think we're at the end of this. Yeah. All right. So that is kind of the main do's and don'ts of general things. Before I jump into the other stuff, and I'm going to switch over to Discord here. And maybe, let me see if I can do this properly with OBS. No, okay. It's not even recording properly. So, all right, I'll just leave it here for now. That's fine. And I will stop sharing my screen because that will happen. There we are. So, if anybody has anything they've heard and they want to like type a question in the chat, feel free to. And then I'm going to cover scams in Japan real quick, and then we'll wrap it up from there. So, but yeah, if you've heard anything like, oh, I heard, like, for example, I was just at a thing yesterday and somebody said, oh, my friend went to Japan and they had to carry their trash everywhere with them because that's what the locals do. And I'm like, well, Yes, if I bring something, then I need to bring it home. But if I'm like buying from somewhere, I can give the trash back, right? Yes, if you want to ask questions, you can definitely raise your hand to speak on stage. Um, Come on up. So, and then we will hit some of the scam stuff. So I don't have a website list for that. I'm just gonna go off my knowledge. But if you ever see anything that looks fishy to you or you're curious, feel free to message me, at me on the Discord. I'd be happy to double check it, take a look at it, anything like that. Excuse me. So yes. Let's see if it will. Okay. All right. So let's dive into that while we're waiting in case anybody has questions. They can ask them. Can you walk around with a backpack? Yes. You can take your backpack everywhere with you. However, the smaller the better. What you're going to find is that most places will have either a place to hang your backpack or you will find that there are baskets underneath the table, a place for you to set your bag. Everyone in Japan generally carries some kind of bag with them. You'll see them everywhere. Absolutely okay to have a backpack. But the smaller your bag, the easier it will be. How easy is it to navigate the airports and private limo buses? Private tourists. So, all, just to waylay any fears, all train stations, pretty much where you guys are going, even up in some of the rural areas, this is true now. Train stations, airports, bus, transit centers, all will have signage and like audio announcements in English and Japanese. And so navigating once you're in a station is not too bad at all. I know the joke is that everyone gets lost in Shinjuku Station. That's true for everybody, even the locals, because it's just a giant maze. But beyond that, generally speaking, um, that is um, easy to navigate. I would say the more difficult things to navigate are if you're out and about and you're going to ask directions, you're going to ask around a person who probably doesn't know English. Not all the staff in those places can speak English well. You will find that they understand English, though, a little bit more than they can actually speak because they do it in school growing up, and they usually are in a city with a lot of, so hearing it, they might be able to understand a little bit, but they may not be able to speak as well. But yeah, no, navigating in those transit areas is pretty easy. Limo buses, if you're just coming in from the airport, it's pretty easy. You just go right up to the counter. You tell them where you want to go. They'll tell you which bus to get on. There'll be like 40 some odd stops in a circle right outside the airport, and they'll say, "Oh, go to." You pay your 1,500 yen or whatever it is, and you can pre-book them as well. And then they'll tell you go to stop 23, and then the bus will have again the ticker and things of that nature will be in English as well as Japanese. So not too much of an issue. So okay, keep bringing in questions while I talk. And what's the deal with eye contact? Yes. So what's the deal with eye contact? Being direct with eye contact is a little uncomfortable for them. Now, if you're taking an order and they're coming up to you, they're going to look at you and you're going to look at them, and that's obviously okay. But when you're on public transit, especially when you're all packed in, everyone just kind of looks down and away and just sort of, understands, especially when it's crowded, right? There's this general understanding that we're all a little uncomfortable, we're all a little crunched, so I'm not going to just stare you down, right, in the face while you're there. It's the same thing for onsen. If you're going to go to a public onsen, right? People are very, very good about, okay, I mean, I'm a big dude, right? If I were to go to public onsen, it would be like, whoa, big dude, coming into the onsen, fat guy, right? Whatever. But all the Japanese, they just ignore you. Basically, that's what they do. They don't look at you, they don't talk to you, they just ignore you. And it's actually quite nice. It's a little annoying for me as a social guy who wants to maybe go talk to people when I'm out in public and things like that. Uh, but unless you're in interaction, like, you're buying something, you're ordering something for food, those require eye contact, and that's perfectly fine. Outside of those kinds of interactions, eye contact is generally, I wouldn't say discouraged, but can signify other things. Um, Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, hey, when in Rome, if they're talking, I'll talk, right? No. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Generally, you're there for quiet relaxation, right? You're not there to make noise and to chatter and things of that nature. So eye contact is okay to do, but just understand it can create some unease if the situation doesn't call for eye contact. Um, that's all. So, some scams. We'll start going into that. I'll pause for any questions as they come in. I'll start with the Buddhist monk scams. You're going to see a bunch of guys. They look like Buddhist monks. They're in orange. They're not Buddhist monks. They're not there collecting anything for anybody. You can ignore them. They're just there to make money and maybe recruit you into their little cult cause. They are not monks. Do not give them money. Okay? So, just be aware of that. The big one, though, that everyone's worried about are the bar scams. The bar scams generally go like this. You're walking down a street, mostly in Tokyo, mostly in the big populated areas of Tokyo, the big Shibuya, Shinjuku, maybe parts of Asakusa, things of that nature. Um, Somebody's out there. You got the girls out there with their all you can drink signs. You got things like that. And you are like, oh, all you can drink for 2,000 yen. That's like 15 US. Let's go. Right? And you go in and you go to drink. And what they'll generally do is they'll either have a pricing schedule that's really ridiculous and they don't tell you about it, where you're like, oh, like beer is maybe cheap and whatever, but you order a mixed drink and you don't realize it costs $45 or something, right? They don't tell you that. You think it's part of the all you can drink and it's not. And then you end up with a really big bill at the end that you weren't expecting. Or the more insidious ones where they actually spike your drink with drugs. I know, isn't it so fun? You get roofied, essentially. You pass out. They move you to a different location so that they can keep bringing other people into that location where people are unsuspecting. They move you to a different bar down the street, things like that. And then you're like able to walk maybe, but you're kind of delirious, half awake. They rack up a giant bill where they charge you $100 a beer kind of thing and $200 of whatever. They just let you drink whatever, be roofied. They charge you a ton, and then they find your room key. They ask you where you're staying, whatever it is. You're not really aware. They take you back to your room, and they drop you off. They won't physically harm you. They will just take all of your money, and they will even take you. They'll tuck you into bed. But then you'll wake up with a $5,000 credit card charge, and you'll go back to the original place, and they'll be like, "Oh, I don't know, you left after like 20 minutes. We don't know." And if there were any like cameras or anything, you would see that you left because you did leave. We went somewhere else, right? And that's how they get away with it. It's pretty easy to avoid it. It's really not. I mean, generally, it's common sense. It's basically, it's not total common sense though, I guess. If you understand the Japanese way of doing things, then it's easier to avoid. If someone is standing outside asking you to come in, like, hey, come on in, don't go in. That's usually how that works with bars. If you're out in the rural place and it's this little one man shop guy and he's like, oh, come on. Yeah. But if it's non Japanese, don't go in. Sometimes it's hard for people because some people have difficulty telling the difference if it's like someone who's Chinese. But if they're non-Japanese, a lot of Nigerians have started you see them in Harajuku out selling sweatshirts and stuff and things like that. And they'll ignore you. They'll actually try to just sell to the Japanese there. But if they're calling you in really fervently, if it's too good to be true, like all you can drink for $15 and there's a bunch of girls advertising it, don't go in. If they're foreign, don't go in. Those are pretty much that'll pretty much cover 99.9% of everything you need to worry about. That's mostly in Kabukicho, which is in Shinjuku. Maybe some parts of Shibuya that most people don't end up in, and then maybe some parts of Asakusa. But pretty much Shinjuku is the main, and maybe Harajuku are kind of the main areas that you find that. Osaka is another place, definitely around Namba and Dotonbori. There's a lot of these sort of Chinese massage parlors that you got to be a little wary of, things like that. But other than that, Japan is really, really safe. Like I say, most of the time it's the other tourists you have to worry about, not the Japanese people, right? Yeah, that's it. So that is kind of the things that I would just be aware of. Yeah. All right. Ubers and taxis. Thank you, Eric, for answering that. Your hotel is a 2 hour. Wait, what? 18-minute drive. Oh. Uh, I would assume, Muteki, that your hotel is probably along a train line, though. So you probably would be able to get at least to the Makuhari Mesi station at least, and then walk. Um, that might be better for you. If you want to, you feel free to message me with your information about where you're staying, and I'd be happy to check if there's anything else in case you were curious. Um, but I would bet there is another way. Um, yeah. All right. Other questions? I'm kind of we're close to 2 o'clock here. I've got some time to be on and hang out. I will probably stop the recording and I'll get that uploaded to YouTube. But I'm happy to stay on. If you have any, you can raise hand, come on stage, and as things die down, we might move to a regular voice channel like we did last time. But if you have other questions, please let me know, and I'd be happy to answer them.